All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monica McCoy, and I am the founder of the Global Supplier Diversity Conference, Pitch University, and Monica Motivates. I am so incredibly excited to be here today with Berunda Prince from the Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And we have such an exciting conversation to share with each of you today. So I want you guys to get your pen and paper together and prepare to take some great notes. But also, I want us to take a moment to just celebrate all the phenomenal sessions that have been going on this entire week as part of Techstars Startup Week Atlanta. And I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to really tell Kylan Kester and the entire team, thank you so much for your hard work for putting together this phenomenal week of sessions. So as I stated, my name is Monica McCoy, and I'm happy to be here today to facilitate a dialogue with the phenomenal Chief Operating Officer of the Russell Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship with Berunda Prince. So Berunda, before we get started, I first just want to say to you, thank you for joining us for this panel today in this fireside chat as we really talk about this critical topic. So before we get started, can you share with everyone a little bit more about your background and your journey from a supplier diversity perspective, and then your journey to being the COO of the phenomenal Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship?
Well, first of all, thank you, Monica, for that wonderful, warm welcome and those outstanding opening comments and remarks. Let me just echo what you've said about a wonderful event that's occurring this week, and also Kylan, who has been the muscle and the mastermind behind it all. So without him, none of this would have been possible. So thank you for that. And I'm going to just dive right into some of my background that is relevant to what we're talking about today. So my background spans everything from corporate America. I've worked for Dow Chemical, Procter & Gamble. So I see the supplier diversity from that side of the corporate side, all the way through to the entrepreneurship side of things as well. I've been an entrepreneur myself. I've launched and led technology accelerators with Comcast and NBC Universal the last 3 years. And now I am firmly entrenched in the Russell Center for Innovation right on Fair Street so that we can make sure that Black entrepreneurs also benefit from all the benefits that you get from becoming an entrepreneur.
Wow, awesome. And literally, I think you bring such a unique broad experience to the table because one, you have the corporate experience. Two, so you understand the supplier diversity landscape from being in corporate America, and then you were an entrepreneur yourself. Then you ran an accelerator, and now you're the COO of the Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And what I would like for us to spend some time on as we start this conversation is to tell us your thoughts on the journey of supplier diversity, where we've been over the years, so the past, the current, and then where we're going for the future.
Absolutely. So the journey of supplier diversity is, I will say, fits and starts. So clearly we have started some time ago with supplier diversity in corporations. And let me just maybe back up and talk about what the benefits are for supplier diversity to corporations and why they would be motivated to do that. First of all, it promotes, innovation in terms of introducing new products, new services, and new solutions. So that's the first thing there. And then it also provides multiple channels so that a corporation is not solely dependent on one particular channel or one particular supplier. And then thirdly, I think it drives competition between the suppliers. So it gives corporations leverage over their suppliers, and it creates value, bottom line value for their stakeholders. So that is really the initial impetus for doing this. Obviously, if you add on to that more recently, some of the reasons for supplier diversity is, frankly, to reflect the communities that these corporations participate in, and bringing to bear what's happened in the last year. We're finding that diverse suppliers makes it easier to pivot during times like this. We're in exceptional times that no one could have foreseen. But diversity suppliers can pivot easier, usually because they may be more nimble, they're smaller, and they're located locally in those communities as well. So there are a lot of benefits that corporations receive from supplier diversity. It builds on partnerships. It certainly can also be a talent pool and pipeline. So there are a lot of reasons beyond actual providing the services and products that you would want to have a diversified supplier pool.
You know, I just absolutely agree with all the points that you just made. And one of the things that I was so passionate about during my 15 years with the Coca-Cola company is that I really wanted to see, you know, more suppliers come in, and suppliers who definitely were coming from different genders, different backgrounds, and bringing different diversity of thought. And so literally, you know, as I spent 15 years in corporate America and my last role as a global director of strategy and innovation, what I noticed is that there was an opportunity to really make sure that as suppliers came to pitch for potential contracts, for potential business, to make sure that they were actually ready for that opportunity. So let's talk about also the supplier readiness. You know, what advice would you have for those who are joining us today who may be looking to diversify their business model and to break into the corporate landscape? You know, what advice would you have for them to actually be ready for that opportunity?
Absolutely. One of the first things is do your research. Not all supplier programs are the same. Not all commitment to those diversity supplier programs are the same. So do your research, find out about the companies that may be in your industry or may be your target customers to see what programs do they have in place. And if I could just elaborate on what I think defines a good supplier diversity program, it would be defining a program and then creating a policy to really support that program. So it would be securing a commitment from the top down. So the CEO is supporting this and providing the resources for it to be successful. It would be making executives accountable. So having accountability for the program, accountability for the results. And then I would say the fourth thing is then developing and identifying opportunities to really bring in a diverse supplier network. Fifth would be leveraging their own business network. So is a Coca-Cola, is a Procter & Gamble, are they leveraging their networks to really find new diverse suppliers? And then I think the last thing is how are they integrating supplier diversity throughout the organization? So is it part of the organizational DNA and part of the organizational mission to make this happen or not? So doing your research to say, look at those criteria, who meets those criteria in terms of my target audience, because you want to make sure that you set yourself up for success. Now, even before you get to that point, you need to look at your own systems, your own processes of your businesses. They need to be robust. You need to see things like if you're providing a service, do you have a secure network or not? Do you have a process for a barcoding system or not? If you want to be a supplier to Target, at Russell Center for Innovation, we just had a company, one of our stakeholder companies, Symphony Chips, who is now supplying its product to Target. And so in order to do that, yes. And that he was able to then leverage from Target to then TJ Maxx and now to Walmart. So building on what he started with to then grow and build his business. And that was by understanding what that network was required to do. And each company and corporation will have their own specific requirements, but there are also some general requirements that will be there as well. You have to look at, do you need to be bonded or not? What kinds of insurance does a company have to have in place in order to do that? So look very hard at the requirements of the corporation that you want to do business with. And then I would also say, along with your research, find mentors. There are people who have done it before. There are serial entrepreneurs that have done this before. Discuss with them beforehand, how did you do this? What were your failures, or what were your stumbling blocks? What were your blind spots that you totally missed? What would you do differently? So really prepare yourself to have that discussion as you go in, and be prepared to say, I'm willing to do this, make changes to accommodate this, or I'm not willing to do this. But be able to be very, very clear in terms of what kinds of customers you're seeking, doing your research on it, and also expanding your own network and leveraging your network of people who have already done it.
Wow. So y'all, the mic just dropped. There were so many nuggets in that response. So literally, if you literally will take the time to do the tangible skills that Baranza just laid out, this is half the battle. And what I want to pivot to are programs like what Techstars are doing, what Startup Atlanta is doing, what the Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship are doing, and companies like myself at Pitch University. These companies are all serving the markets for really helping entrepreneurs to really help to build those partnerships and build those relationships. So we know that relationships and that network is half the battle. But when we think about also making sure that entrepreneurs realize that maybe you don't come in as a tier 1 supplier, maybe you start at like a tier 2 and subcontract to be able to scale yourself up to a tier 1. Can you give your thoughts on, entrepreneurs are like, I want to get that tier 1 contract, but you're like, well, maybe you should start where you can learn from a supplier who's already been doing it for a while, and then eventually build yourself up to that tier 1 contract.
That's so correct, because starting small enables you to learn as you grow and as you're doing. I think pilots are the best way to do it. So maybe you don't get that tier 1 contract immediately, but maybe you get a pilot to start working on not only the relationship, but also the contractual agreement, so that you can build on that, to that understanding. As I said previously, every corporation will have their own nuance in terms of what their program requirements are. A pilot or an experiment or some kind of partnership, early partnership, gives you the opportunity to then learn from that, build that into your own processes and system, so that you are ready then to get into that tier 1. It also then gives you an opportunity to demonstrate your ability to be a tier 1 supplier. So that one of the things that often challenging for entrepreneurs to do is to get that first great big opening, to get that first chance and that first opportunity. So again, as in the case of Symphony Chips, leveraged one to get to the next, to get to the next. And by doing this at a smaller scale level, you get to have that immediate input and feedback. You get to forge a tighter relationship with your customer, and you get to have some concrete metrics or measurable things that you put in place to say, yes, this is a success, or yes, we're making progress, or no, we might need to rethink this in some way. So I think it's an excellent way. And the final thing is, if you are an entrepreneur, scarce resources, you want to make sure that those scarce resources are focused on what's going to deliver the greatest value. So the way that you're going to do that is not necessarily by jumping to tier 1 right away, but maybe transitioning by focusing those resources each level and each step of the way, so that you can get to tier 1.
And I want to build off what you just said about the scarce resources. We know that, especially here in the city of Atlanta, we have so many dynamic women and underrepresented founders in Atlanta. And one of the things that we've seen, according to the latest 2019 American Express report, was that the average revenue for a minority-owned business in 2019 was only $65,800. So and that's the revenue number. So we're not even talking net profit. We're saying that's the top line number. And 2 years before that, it was 67,000. So we know that we're going in the wrong direction. And now this year with COVID, disproportionately impacting women and minority-owned businesses, what would you say is going to be, sort of the call to action for Fortune 500 companies when it comes to supplier diversity for really addressing the disproportionate impact right now on diverse suppliers?
We've all seen in the last few months or so, certainly since George Floyd, the corporate manifestos that have been made. Most corporations have pledged, sizable sums of money and investment to help Black and Brown communities as a result of that, and as a result, frankly, of their own employee base, expecting this as part of being good corporate citizenship. I think that we all have a role. So the ecosystem, and I say ecosystem, including big business, has a role to play in this. Not only because it helps in terms of customer base or in terms of talent retention or employees and so on, but also because it helps our communities, it helps our cities, it helps our states, it helps our world be better. The fact that you said that we know that during this COVID pandemic, 41% of Black businesses have failed, 41%. And that's roughly double what we're seeing for other groups. And the reason why is because there hasn't been that resiliency in the same way. There hasn't been that reserve in the same way. And because we are disproportionately represented in those industries that were hardest hit. So hospitality, service, food service. So all of those kind of customer facing businesses were very, very hard hit. So looking at that, corporations do have to accept and assume the responsibility of saying part of what we can do to contribute to, I say, the retooling or reimagining is reimagining by reinvesting in our communities, reinvesting in supply diversity, looking for opportunities to invest in ways that helps Black businesses grow bigger and grow better and grow stronger. Because the 41% that failed, that means that there's 59% that didn't. So that 59% is going to be stronger. They're going to be better positioned to then reimagine what it looks like in the future. I will say that even with that those stark kind of statistics, there are pockets of optimism and hope. At the Russell Center, if we look at our entrepreneurs, 90% of our entrepreneurs are still in existence. So that's in contrast to the, thank you, yes, I know, to the 41% that, that weren't for broader Black businesses. And you have to look at why is that? And part of the reason is because there was support there when Black businesses, when PPP came out, the Personal Protection Program for businesses came out, it actually shone a light on the fact that many of our businesses didn't have the kinds of business relationships or banking relationships to even know how to apply for those monies. So the first round, it was almost like a to figure out, what do we do? How do we do? Where do we go? The Russell Center saw that gap, stepped in, and helped over almost 200 companies, Black businesses, to get PPP funding. The interesting thing, Monica, for me, is that roughly 60% of those Black businesses were not from the state of Georgia. So by word of mouth, people were hearing, hey, here's an organization, here's a group that can help do this. And so I think having all of these resources at hand and communicating those, like the Georgia Minority Supplier Development Council as a resource, the Atlanta Wealth Building Initiative as a resource, so that Black businesses understand that there are resources there, resources to avail, and particularly right now, leverage this moment, leverage this, because history has shown us, like most things, things come in cycles. Right now, this is a cycle of intense scrutiny and hopefully intense commitment to making sure that Black and Brown communities don't continue to disproportionately suffer, not only from the pandemic in terms of job loss, business loss, healthcare, opportunities. So leverage this moment, take advantage of it.
Yeah, I love how you said that. And I was recently having a conversation with a C-suite executive for a Fortune 50 company. And I just said, unfortunately, the data has not changed in a significant way for women and underrepresented founders over the last 15 years. And when we study the data, in many ways, the net worth and generational wealth, unfortunately, in a lot of metrics is going backwards in a lot of metro areas. And so one of the things that I am really inspired by is not only the great work that the Russell Center is doing, that AWBI is doing, that the Georgia Minority Supplier Diversity Council is doing, but I am so inspired by the collaborations because what I think that everyone is starting to realize is that there's no single organization, there's no single person that is going to solve this issue, because if that were the case, then we would definitely see that the data would tell a very compelling story. And so what I am very excited to hear is, things like accelerators that are going on that are really focused on Black and Brown founders and really helping to get them ready to go and do business with corporations and educating them about the fact that you have to overcome the solopreneur trap, because if you're just a business of one, it's going to be hard for corporations to take you seriously long term, because if something happens to you, then that business is gone. And so I really want us to pivot slightly to talk about, the collaborative model of here in Atlanta, and also, really understanding how can we really start making sure that we're seeing these accelerators continue to feed the pipeline so that we can definitely change the trajectory of the data?
Yes. That is one of Atlanta's superpowers, I would say, in terms of collaboration. And I say that, having been immersed in other ecosystems, we certainly have a lot of strengths. Everything from talent pipeline to corporations, to the diversity of our communities. Certainly collaboration is right up there near the top. Startup Atlanta itself provides the guide, the ecosystem guide to Atlanta. And in there, you see the amazing work that's being done by so many organizations. There's Atlanta Tech Village, there's ATDC, there's Cranium Incubator that is focused on, underrepresented groups. There's Launchpad 2X. There's so many different opportunities for entrepreneurs to certainly become engaged and to learn and to build their networks, because that is another important part of their journey. Is what is your network? What is your support group? Because we all know you're going to hit challenges. And Atlanta's done a really good job of saying this pie is big enough for all of us. And not only is it big enough, we can continue to grow it so that everybody can have their of that pie building, or the ingredients to make a better pie for all of us. One of the things that I think that most of us do, there were the Siggy Awards earlier this week, where they were celebrating four tech influencers who have made their lives this business, this work. Every one from Mike Ross was one of them, Bernie Dixon was another. So there's this recognition that there's power in collaboration, there's power in amplifying our footprint and working together to do that. And I think because it also builds on the history of Atlanta, that we are certainly have a very complex history, but we also have a history of working together. We have a history of bringing out the best in all of us and bringing that to bear to make something better than what it was before. We see this with not only collaborating with different programs, but collaborating with supporting each other, collaborating with saying to maybe an entrepreneur, you may not be appropriate for this particular program or my program, but hey, here's a program over here that you might be. Let me facilitate an introduction to this person. So understanding that we don't all have to do everything. We just all can do our part of it. And by each of us doing our part of that, then we can then accomplish everything together. And I think that reframing is really important. And it models what successful entrepreneurs have to do as well. They can't do everything. They can't do everything by themselves. But what they can do is form alliances, build teams, build connections, experiment, pilots in order to then build so that they can then do the right things and then get the right kinds of results.
Wow, that was absolutely beautiful. And I will tell you, as someone who was born in Atlanta, who went to Emory University and has made Atlanta my lifelong home, I have seen, just such progress over my lifetime here in the city with the trajectory of the startup community and the great work that Kylan and his team is doing with Startup Atlanta. The Startup Atlanta Awards from earlier this year just seem so far away at this point, but it was such a tremendous honor to be in the room with the Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, with Launchpad 2X, with Sig Mosley, and so many of the other pioneers for the startup community. And one of the things that I will say is that, when I left corporate America, I assumed that I was going to jump out here and it was just going to be so easy to build these strategic partnerships for founders to really come and do business with corporations. But I realized is that it was a three-pronged solution that was needed. So the education was definitely needed to make sure that we went over skills such as really understanding the basics of your financial acumen, knowing your numbers. Do you know your balance sheet? Do you know your income statement? Making sure you understood the basic principles of building a strategy. Just things that I took for granted that I learned in corporate America. But I realized that education wasn't enough, that we also had to make sure that we activated and built those strategic partnerships and built those networks and closed that pipeline. But then we also had to make sure that we help entrepreneurs to sustain those relationships, to sustain those contracts when they close them, so it wasn't just a one and done. And so my question to you is, as we continue to see, like the stat that you said earlier about the underbanked and the unbanked founders and the lack of access to the PPP funding and the EIDL funding, for Black and Brown communities, how do we continue to close those gaps? And how do we also bring greater attention to CDFIs, so that people can really understand that, you're a diversifier. There are these resources out here for you, because the only way that you can do business with a large corporation is to have cash flow. You're not going to be able to do this with a large corporation if you are living payroll cycle to payroll cycle, but you have to really have cash flow to be able to sustain the business until the invoice gets paid. So what are your thoughts on that?
So Monica, I think what you have pointed out is that there is a failure or lack of opportunity, because I don't think that talent resides in any one demographic. but opportunity can be different by demographic and exposure. So along with the teaching and the learning is the exposure that then leads to opportunity as well. And so what I think, all of us have to do is meet entrepreneurs where they are. And they're not going to all be at the same point or the same place. So we have to meet them where they are and then work with them to provide the resources and identify the gaps that they have, and then work with them to find, well, how do we address those gaps? So for one, it may be, as you said, the financial literacy. It may be being unbanked or underbanked, or maybe we just don't have a relationship with our banker. They don't know us, we don't know them. So when I get into trouble or I have a problem or a challenge, they're not likely to support or help me. So we say you build these bridges before you have to cross them. Build the bridges before the turbulence happens, so that when the turbulence is there, they're already there and in place. And so there are institutions and organizations and groups like all of the ones that we just articulated earlier that are working to not only educate, but expose and then connect to those resources. Fortunately, at the Russell Center, one of our tenets is that we want to make it easier for entrepreneurs to connect to those resources. So we have AWBI that's located right there in our building. We have ACE Capital Group located right there in our building. We're forging partnerships with Chase Bank, who's going to be located right there in our building, because we want to facilitate it, but we also want to model and demonstrate how do you build those relationships? How do you have those conversations? Because none of us were born just knowing this. There's a bit of generational and institutional learning that goes and that's passed on. So the Russell family is now in, say, generation 3. So generation 2 and 3 learned about all those things from generation 1. But if you're generation 1, who are you learning from? So what we have to do collectively is, again, to educate, to expose, to support where people and where entrepreneurs are, because they can get there with the right resources, with the right opportunity, with the right connections. They can definitely get there.
So, Rhonda, I just want to celebrate you and all the dynamic leaders in Atlanta who are doing such phenomenal work and building this phenomenal ecosystem. And as you mentioned, some of those great companies that are located at RCIE, I wanted to also highlight, who do you think are some of the companies that are best in class from a supplier diversity perspective? So as we know about the $1 billion roundtable, where corporations that are committing $1 billion of spend to diverse suppliers each year. So not a 10-year strategy, but every year these companies are committing at least $1 billion of their spend to be with diverse suppliers. So tell me about some of the companies here in Atlanta that you think are really getting it right.
So I think, my hometown, one of my hometown favorites is Coca-Cola. I think they are getting it right. They're moving forward with the right kind of structure, putting, I would say, putting their effort into it. They're really working to develop a supplier network that is robust, but that is integrated into, who they are as well. And I think that they're definitely best in class because they have an affinity for Atlanta. They have been one of the hallmarks of Atlanta for such a long time. They are our hometown company. Even as other hometown companies spring up, they have had that longevity there. So I definitely want to point them out. I would also say that Delta has a great program with great leadership over there that's doing some amazing things. And I think they're taking this time where clearly the airline is hard hit, but they're taking this time to also shore up the minority supplier network. And so I think that's a bold step and a bold statement that they're making about their commitment, not only to Atlanta and to their industry, but commitment to saying, we're going to bring everybody along with us. We're not going to retrench because it's now difficult and hard for us. We're going to keep building on this because we understand that this is going to pay off, you know, in terms of dividends in the future. So yes, we'll get through this rough patch here, but we'll keep pushing forward. So they are two that really come to mind, and I will have to do on a national basis. So it's not necessarily just Atlanta, but it has an Atlanta presence. But Target has been very good at taking best practices from all across the country and then employing them, you know, certainly here in Atlanta and other places. And I've been amazed to see how their supplier diversity program has grown and improved and become more sophisticated over the years. And I think with experience, they too have learned what works with diverse suppliers. What is it that diverse suppliers need? What do they need to come in with? And so they almost, they assign a handler to their diverse suppliers so that it is someone that can show you the Target way of doing things, but not only the Target way, they're extrapolating those foundations and best practices to say, you want to be a supplier to any major corporation of any note and size, these are the foundational things that you need to do. So it's helping these entrepreneurs and suppliers, not only at Target, but helping them again to land in other places as well. So those are three companies that immediately come to mind that not only are making a financial commitment, but are also making the resource and talent commitment to make their program succeed.
Wow. Well, as a 15-year Coke alum, I must concur with you as someone who was able to grow up in Coca-Cola. So I definitely concur there. And I've also seen, witnessed the great work from Delta and of course Target, with all the great stuff they're doing with really being very intentionally focused on amplifying products that traditionally would not receive the visibility on such a national platform. So this has been a conversation where we focused a lot on what is supplier diversity, who are some of the best in class players in the supplier diversity field, what are some of the challenges that we're having. And now, you know, I want to address what everyone is thinking right now, COVID-19. Unprecedented. No one's business plan. I know that I worked very hard on my strategy, and in 2019 we were very excited. We had our strategy in place, and up until about March 1st, it was going as planned. And March 1st, you know, everything paused. We all were forced to go through global change management simultaneously as a world, not just as a country, but as a world. And one of the things that I want to talk to you about now is, how do you pivot as a small business owner when literally you you have limited resources as a diverse founder, and you are looking to continue the momentum, but when something like COVID hits, how do you continue to build that resilience? So I love that, you know, 90% of the businesses within the Russell Center of Innovation Entrepreneurship are still viable, are still operational. But for those who did not survive COVID and are now thinking about, well, what is my next step? You know, I'm trying to really figure out, how can I turn this around? Can you give some practical tips for those organizations who are looking to definitely, as a diverse supplier, rebuild and then get themselves back to the level of being able to have the confidence to have conversations with the Delta, with the Coca-Cola, with the Target?
So Monica, one of the things that we've seen about companies that did succeed or are succeeding in leveraging and really taking, changing adversity and turning it into opportunity is how they deployed technology. So they were able to make the transition from using technology to leveraging technology. We see this every day where Zoom was not really, I mean, it was known, obviously, but it exploded because of timing, opportunity, but also they were prepared for it. So timing and opportunity wouldn't have mattered at all had they not done the hard work previously to be prepared for this moment. They didn't know that this moment would be pandemic and COVID. They didn't know when this moment would hit, but they were prepared for it. So the companies that we've seen that have navigated this the best have done a few things. Leverage technology, so they've made that shift from using to leveraging it. They've gotten closer to their customers. They've really focused on what is my customer doing right now, what does my customer need, and how do I make sure that that happens. They've been very nimble, very nimble. They've been able to push decision-making down. And, you know, for entrepreneurs, that's fairly easy to do. We're, you know, black through it. But they've been nimble with their decision-making, and they've taken risk in terms of saying, I'm not going to have perfect information. I'm not going to have, you know, complete information. So let me just go with this. And they've taken those risks and then said, if that doesn't work, they then have adjusted and changed very quickly as well. And so I would say, looking forward to 2021, look at it and see this as an opportunity. Nobody knows what the future is going to hold. So you might as well state to the universe what you want that future to be, because who's going to refute it, you know? Nobody's going to say, well, no, that can't be, they don't know, clearly. So state your claim on what that universe is, what the future is going to be in the universe, and then go out and make it happen. Go out and make it happen, knowing that you've got to be nimble, you've got to be focused with your scarce resources. You've got to your earlier point, Monica, you need to know the numbers. You've got to know what's my cost of, you know, my customer acquisition cost. You've got to be able to know that so that you know, well, for every customer I get, this is what it's going to be, and then what's the return on that. So getting closer to your customer. Who's my customer? Why are they buying from me? Why are they buying from me right now? And what is it that they, you know, what more do they need? Can I anticipate in the future what those needs might be? And persistence. You can't put a price tag on persistence and grittiness and just dogged determinedness. And being able to say, okay, I got this muscle memory. It's painful right now, but I've been here before. I'm going to get through this, and it's going to be even better, because we all know that growth doesn't come without some pain, without some sacrifice, without some change and some commitment. It just doesn't happen. I wish it did with my workouts all the time. I'm like, wow, I wish I could have that pill. Well, I have to spend this time, but that's not the case. So we all know part of this is simply getting through this. The experience of getting through this alone is going to be empowering, is going to be enabling, and it's going to provide those opportunities that we may not yet see on the horizon, but they are there. And we have examples all around us, from Amazon to Zoom, to now all of the drive-throughs that have pivoted to that. So finding ways to still deliver product, service, and value to your customers in a new way can also be that competitive advantage for you. So look at it. How do I make this work for me? And to not give up. To not give up. We have to see failure certainly as a necessary, unpleasant, but necessary part of the journey. And we have to look at all the success stories. We don't see those failures behind there, but they were there. They didn't hit it out of the park the first time.
You know, I think one of our hometown, just huge success stories, Tyler Perry just does such a great job of telling, how you can go from such adversity to being a success story that is not an overnight story, that is a story of resilience. And so I'm gonna ask this question really for our audience joining us today is, how can business units best leverage their supplier diversity programs. Many companies have them and we might not know about it.
Yeah, and that's something that I think all companies struggle with, is getting the information out into the right hands. I say it's a network challenge. So companies are not haven't expanded their network to include the places that it needs to be. And I say include the places, not only like the organizations like the Georgia Minority Supplier organization, but include HBCUs, include colleges and universities, include their own employee network, because employees know people who have businesses and who could be potential suppliers to their corporations as well. And sometimes their own employees don't know what the requirements are, but they could be a point of leverage or entry point into it, and they could be ambassadors for the corporation. So inform and educate your own employee base on what are you looking for, how do you network or connect people to the right people in the organization as well. Certainly entrepreneurs, going places where there are serial entrepreneurs, organizations that are supporting or serial entrepreneurs as well. So I think that, and business units have to realize, and as I said, my earlier comment was, it has to be integrated into their thinking. This can't be, let me build this product, let me do this, let me deliver the service. Oh, wait a minute, do we have a supplier diverse, do we have a diverse supplier? That can't be the way that it happens. It's gotta be, wow, we're doing this and stuff. Let's get a partner to be in this with us and to develop this with us approach to things, as opposed to, we've done everything. Oh, and by the way, here's the the add-on at the end. And so it's a reframing so that the corporation itself sees it just as integral to the bottom line as they see the financial reporting that's done, as they see going out and doing that sales call. And that's the other thing. Salespeople are a great way because they interact with the broader community on a different level of basis. They see things, they hear things, so leverage your own sales force to kind of connect back and say, who are you hearing that's doing this? Or if you see something that you think is really innovative and different, hey, we want to hear about it. We want to know about that. So I would say leverage your employees, get the information and disseminate it out there to a broader set of organizations and groups and avenues that can help support you as well. And then again, make sure that keep your own program accountable. Keep it accountable. If one of the things that you're measuring your minority supplier program on is how many new ones do we get or how much outreach is done, you will get the data in order to say, well, when we did this, we got this kind of result. When we did that, we got this kind of result. So it'd be better for us to focus more of our attention on this versus that. But without the data, you're almost flying blind and not really fully embracing and certainly not leveraging your entire program.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was really concerning for me as I stepped out of corporate America was learning that many organizations were Googling to find suppliers, and that was their top way of finding suppliers to fit into RFPs that they had. And I said, wow, I said, this is a gap that, until you read the data, you're a little shocked by it. But one of the things that I have to commend, especially here in Atlanta, is that a lot of corporations are bringing innovation and entrepreneurship within the walls of the organization and building some best-in-class accelerator programs to really make sure that they are reaching and bringing diverse suppliers into the accelerator to get them ready to potentially do business. And one of those things I would like to speak about is your previous role with where you were doing all the great accelerator work with Comcast. Can you speak more to that program and some of the tangible results that you saw when it came to Black and Brown founders receiving additional visibility that otherwise, would have been very hard to receive?
So, as I mentioned before, I launched and led Comcast NBC Universal The Farm, the tech accelerator's early stage startup. And we were not demographically focused. We were technology and industry agnostic, focused on early stage. But in that context, we accomplished having roughly 50% of our startup founders to be of color without the demographic focus. And didn't do quite as well on women, but I would say roughly about 20% on women. And people say, how did you do that? First of all, I say, look at me. I'm a Black woman. And so, people look at what you're doing as well. And so entrepreneurs would say, okay, there's a Black woman leading this. I think this might be a place that would be welcoming and affirming for Black entrepreneurs, for Black founders. So that's one thing. Second thing is going to places where we are. So going to Black Wall Street to recruit companies, going to HBCUs to recruit companies. So I mentioned earlier that this is like a network gap. So if your network only looks just like you, it's going to be very difficult for you to have a diverse anything, everything from a diverse board of directors to diverse suppliers. So you've got to broaden your network. You've got to go to where people are. So in the case of corporations, I say, you have an employee resource group. Most corporations do. Most of them have a Black one. Most of them have a Latina. Most of them have Asian Pacific one. So LGBTQ, go to those groups and say, look, we're looking for diverse minority suppliers, or we're looking for diverse founders. So use those networks because they know them, And so, and don't be afraid to reach outside and extend your network in different places. There are certainly school associations. There are different clubs that you can certainly go to and speak to and say, this is what we're trying to do. And when people see that authentic desire for help, an authentic ask, and for commitment to it, people respond. They say, oh, okay, you're really interested in having women founders or Black founders. And then the other powerful thing is, frankly, word of mouth. So once you start that, you build an engine where, okay, the farm is known as a place where diverse founders can do well, and diverse founders hear it from each other. And so you build this kind of, I won't say cycle, but a deal flow almost. It's returning it, because the word of mouth is the best way to really get customers of any kind. So I see that as one of my my best achievements was to have a diverse accelerator program without that demographic focus. And I don't think it's rocket science. It's simply going places where people are, meeting them where they are, and making it abundantly clear that this is a place that we want you to be, that we will support you, and that we will welcome you.
Well, Veranda, you have literally shed so much knowledge, so much insight, so much inspiration today. And I wish that we had 3 more hours to continue this conversation. But as we get ready to head for the home stretch, one of the things that I want to just make very evident is that we have a phenomenal mayor and Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, and all the amazing work that she has done to lead our city through really a very challenging year, to say the least. And one of the things that I really appreciate is having a mayor to be such a champion for entrepreneurs and to really believe in entrepreneurship. And as we think about the corporations here in Atlanta, one of the opportunities that we still have is, and not just here in Atlanta, but across the United States, is the lack of diversity in the C-suite and the lack of diversity on boards of directors. And so as much as, I am very passionate about supplier diversity programs. One of the things that I continue to be concerned about is that if there is lack of diversity in the C-suite role, at the CEO, the CFO, and those COO roles, then how can we make systemic change where it's actually, people's compensation are tied to really making sure that diversity is flowing through. And we saw a great announcement recently from the great work that Zinga Shaw, formerly with the Atlanta Hawks, the great work that she's doing with Starbucks. But, Ursula Burns was a phenomenal trailblazer and just made us proud as the first African-American female CEO of a Fortune 500 company. But if we look at the data since Ursula, it's been quite concerning to say the least. And so to all the suppliers who are saying, I shop at this company, I'm a consumer, I want to potentially be a partner with this company, but I look at the supplier diversity team and there's 3 people on the team, and then I look at other parts of the organization and there are 50 members of that team and they have a much bigger budget. How do we continue to push the message to corporations that if you invest in your supplier diversity programs, if you put that financial commitment behind it, you will see the return on your investment? How do we continue to get that message through?
The data is very clear, Monica, that those corporations that have diverse boards or have stronger diversity showing have a stronger and more robust bottom line. Hands down, been shown every which way that you can. I think McKinsey might have been the first report some years ago that came out with that and demonstrated that. That led to a flurry of diversity being seen as women, and in this case, frankly, white women, being moved into places of position and that were well deserved and earned. But yes, we have not seen the same when it comes to racial diversity as we've seen with gender diversity. Again, it's a network problem, because when you are recruited for board of directors, and I recently was recruited for a board of directors position for a company here in Atlanta, it was because of network. It was because they knew me. It was because of that association. So again, got to broaden that network. The other thing that we can do, and I say we, the underrepresented group, is continue to push it and continue to use the data to demonstrate not only the value and the need, but how that then ties back to our own communities, ties back to us as stakeholders in those companies. We're voting, I'm voting because of this, and this, and saying, yep, you've got to get a more diverse board. I love the fact that Goldman Sachs said that they're no longer going to invest in companies that don't have a woman on the board. Imagine what would happen if something similar was done to say, we're no longer going to invest in companies that don't have a person of color on the board. Imagine if, companies said, yeah, we're going to put in these metrics so that we have targets that every year we're going to do this and this and this, because it can be done. We've seen it done for white women. We've seen the needle move for white women. So it's, I won't say take the same playbook, but take that same framework and apply it and say, yes, it's about opening up and sharing our networks, building on those networks, because the talent is there. You got to just make sure that the opportunity becomes there as well. And employees have a role to play in that. Let them know this is what we want. If you if you as a corporation want talent, want partnerships with diverse suppliers, you've got to make it known that that's what you want, but also people are going to look at what you're doing. It's not enough to say one thing, you've
Wow.
actually got to walk the walk as well.
Well, Veranda, we are down to our last minute, and I personally just want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom. I want to thank you for taking your life and living it on purpose, because you could be doing anything and you choose to commit to do this work that is so needed, and to work with one of the premier organizations here in Atlanta, the Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, to continue to change the trajectory for women, for underrepresented founders, and to give them that access and amplify their voice. So I salute you. I salute all of the individuals from the TechStars program, from Startup Atlanta, from the Atlanta ecosystem, because this is not easy work to do. These are not easy conversations to have, but I am certainly beyond grateful for you being so transparent, so authentic, and then just gifting us with this beautiful message today and these amazing insights. So with that, Veranda, I want to just take a moment for you to give us some last parting comments as we prepare
Monica,
to close.
first of all, this has been an exceptional conversation because you've been exceptional at leading this. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that and how easy you've made it for me. So I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge all of the hard work TechStars has done, Startup Atlanta, Kylan. I mean, so many people believe in this and know that they believe in Atlanta and what the ecosystem can be. And my parting comment is simply that we can all bring our time, our talents, our commitment to bear to make this city the city that I know that we can be. And part of that is wealth generation for all of our communities. Part of that is, growing our businesses so that they're thriving, generating new jobs. And part of that is setting the standard for what business should look like and be. And I have every confidence that we'll do that together. And thank you all today.
Thank you so much, Veranda. What a beautiful and inspirational conversation. And with that, we will turn it back over to the TechStars team. Thank you for joining us, and we appreciate this great dynamic conversation.